Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the Politics of Planting Roots in Boston, Property and Wealth Creation, one of the many virtual conversations focused on bringing the community closer to the Boston Globe's journalism. My name is Tiana Woodard. I am a new Boston Globe reporter covering Black neighborhoods through the Report for America program. And for today's talk, we're going to be hearing from an amazing group of individuals with perspectives to share around wealth creation and real estate, and as well as local business ownership. And so now I'm going to give some short bios for our three panelists. And so first we have Sam Montano. Sam is a queer Latina housing and community development organizer based in the Jamaican Plain neighborhood of Boston. Originally from LA, Sam has been in Boston the last 8 years, diving deep into city politics and community organizing. In addition, Sam has an elected seat on the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council, co-chairs the Mass Now Political Action Committee, and participates on the Young Democrats of Massachusetts Latino Caucus. Pamela Rosario Perez is an award-winning business leader in the areas of customer experience and cybersecurity services. A collaborative problem solver, her work has inspired public and private sector leaders to bridge the gap between the high-tech economy and historically marginalized communities through cross-sectoral initiatives, such as Cyber Warrior Academy, Massachusetts' first certified cybersecurity and machine learning apprenticeship for women, veterans, and people of color. And today, you can find Pamela redesigning how customers engage with cybersecurity advisors globally at Rapid7. She's also a first-gen investor and entrepreneur, and her passion for real estate investing has led her to found Rosanna Real Estate Strategies, an investment firm that teaches Black and Latinx communities how to build wealth through real estate and offer scholarships to high school students looking to drive change in their own communities. By increasing real access to real estate knowledge, she hopes to empower folks of disenfranchised backgrounds to see real estate investing as a vehicle for economic mobility. And then last but not least, we have Quante Turner, who's also known as Q, and she is a multi-talented creative and entrepreneur. She's also the founder of Q Made It, an Emerald City plant shop, the latter of which is the first Black women-owned plant shop in New England. She has, sorry, I lost my spot. She has over 10 years of experience in community organizing, event management, recruiting, facilitating conversations and trainings around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in her spare time, Quante helps connect other entrepreneurs of color to local resources as the Food Entrepreneur Programs Manager at Commonwealth Kitchen, and serves as one of the lead organizers for the Boston Young Black Professionals, whose mission is to curate more space for professionals of color to fully enjoy all that Boston has to offer. And she's also a proud member of Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and a native of Mattapan who's passionate about creating a more inclusive and connected Boston. So from these bios, as you can already tell, these three bring expertise from a variety of areas. So I'm sure, and I'm really excited about this really good conversation we're gonna have. And just a reminder and just a rundown of the show before we get into our questions. So the first, until 12:45, I'm gonna ask a mixture of pre-submitted questions from the community as well as some that I generated myself. And then after those questions, I'll open the discussion to Qs from the audience. And if you want to ask a question to the panelists, use the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And just a friendly reminder, as was specified when you first zoomed into here, this discussion is going to be recorded and distributed after the event. So be on your best behavior. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the questions. And the first one I have, most of mine are kind of tailored to everyone, but I just wanted to hear from each of you with such interesting and varied perspectives about, I guess, what challenges you've had generating wealth in Greater Boston, and how those challenges inform the work that each of you three do today. And whoever wants to start, I don't want to call anyone out. You can go in or pass it on or popcorn to whoever.
Yeah, I can start. So I born and raised in Boston, Mattapan to be exact. And I didn't come from much. My family didn't have a lot of money or resources. And so it's been super challenging to try to generate wealth when you are coming from a deficit. So any millennial, Generation Z, any generation honestly can testify to the fact that being in Boston, one job is never enough, which is kind of why I founded Q Made It and then Emerald City, because my career in education was not going to pay all the bills that I needed to live in one of the most expensive cities in the country. So it's been a challenge. I'm still trying to find kind of the answer to how do we build wealth, still coming from such a huge deficit. And now that Boston is being, super priced out, the reality is that a lot of natives and or transplants can't afford to live in the city limits, which is why I kind of set up shop in Norwood, one of the few at the time more affordable places to buy and open a business.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Q. I mean, similar to you, I also do not come from a lot of means. I am not a Boston native. I am a transplant. I was born in the Dominican Republic. I don't know if you guys can see the painting behind me, but like this house right here, the wooden house with the zinc metal sheets, that's the house that I grew up in. So no plumbing. If anyone is familiar with the Dominican Republic, very spotty electricity. So very spotty power. And that's kind of like my background, right? My family came here like many others looking for a better future for their kids. And, it's very interesting when you're in the Dominican Republic looking at, America through the screen and thinking that, wow, getting a job is going to be so easy. And, money in a way, like money grows on trees. And, coming here and trying to figure out how does this even happen was also very confusing for me. I grew up with a family that was very much trying to keep us safe. And they were like, hey, don't shake the table at school. Like, don't be asking too many questions at work. Don't be a disruptor, right? You don't want to set off the wrong alarms or give the wrong impression and potentially, get yourself in a bad place. So I think, even going through the college process, I went to a high school that was quite racist and had its issues. So it was very hard for me to even get like appropriate, college guidance. But I was like, hey, through the grapevine, I heard about certain schools and scholarships. I was able to go to Harvard. And at that point, my thinking was, well, if I go to Harvard, I'm going to be rich. Like, this is how you generate wealth. That was a lie, because of the way that I was raised and with all these fears of, hey, I don't want to ask about money. You don't talk about money. You don't talk about careers or stuff. You're just supposed to figure it out. I remember to this, like it was yesterday, that I graduated. And afterwards I was like, oh, so who gives us a job now? Like, is there a meeting where we come in and talk about work and like post-grad life? Because I had no idea like what you were supposed to do, the interview process or anything. So my reality at that moment was that I was actually homeless. So I was homeless after graduating college with great GPA, but no understanding of wealth building, how to, just what that post-grad life was. And I think it was in that moment, living in that reality where my biological mother was visiting me from the Dominican Republic, was her first time here. And now I'm like, oh my God, like I'm homeless. Now you're like, we're both homeless. And now we have to figure out in Boston, obviously, as y'all know, being in a new city, having to figure it out, you're just like coming out of a college bubble, like you're totally confused. And I think, what, I'm very grateful for that moment, because that point is what forced me to start reading about wealth building and looking into high net worth individuals and figuring out how did they actually create their wealth? How do they keep their wealth? How do they transfer their wealth? What are the tax structures? Like, okay, exactly, like how do you go about partnering with different people in order to invest? So I think it was through that, to Q's point, like greater Boston, Boston is extremely expensive. Even for someone who is making six figures or whatever the case may be, it's extremely expensive. So this whole process really forced me to start educating myself on financial literacy, having the hard conversations that I was taught to not have, reaching out to people, literally cold calling them on LinkedIn, to really like understand, hey, like I see that you're an investor, like what is your process? Can I learn from you? And even though I had no money and I had no expertise, telling them, hey, I have my time. Like I'm willing to be your feet on the road, your hands on deck and help you figure this out just for me to learn. And I think that was like my path to really starting to understand money systems, how money works, and how to start building wealth. But definitely extremely difficult, lots of mistakes made, lots of learnings gleaned. But in any case, that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do, trying to help others understand these systems as well.
Thanks, Q and Pamela. I'll go last. I think that I'm originally from Los Angeles, so moving from one incredibly expensive city to another incredibly expensive city didn't really impact my perception of how much things cost. But generationally, I also come from a family with like low income, even though I'm a third generation Mexican American. So my family still wasn't able to build up wealth. At least my parents, their brothers and sisters, I think were, but not them themselves. So once my parents divorced, my mom was a single mom. You know, sometimes, at least in my family, that meant like lending my mom my social security number so we could get utilities, so we could get basic things, so we could like, you know, have access to things that we needed to make our lives easier. So I spent a lot of time recovering from the credit horror that was my mom using my social security, and I'm still recovering from it now. And so that's really held me back from generating wealth, is because I went to college and luckily my family's income was so low, my tuition was free because I went to a state school, but I still took on debt to eat and to live. So, and then I defaulted on loans. So I've had a really hard time building up wealth over time. And I don't have a family who can help me bridge those gaps. And so for a long time, it's been like either working 3 jobs, just trying to like make rent and not being able to generate wealth over time. Or it's been like, oh man, my credit, when is that 7 years going to be up, you know, so I can like have a restart. And I think that when you're in a city as expensive as Boston, you make choices, and sometimes those choices are to live your life every day versus like being able to save or being able to pay down credit just because you're trying to get through the day. So it's a real challenge and it's tough. And I think that's why I approach a lot of my work communally, because, you know, there's no sense in saving yourself if you can't save the community, right? So, and that's a hard choice to make for a lot of folks because they're responding to trauma, but it's also sometimes what we need to do to advance, right? So it's complicated, I think, but that's my perspective.
I really appreciate like all 3 of yours, like transparency and also vulnerability and all of your perspectives in terms of generating wealth. Like I just like graduated from college and I am like working on building my credit, and there's so many other things. So I am like in y'all's boat, and I feel a little bit more relieved to know that I'm not alone, because I really do not know where I'm going, and I will probably reach out to y'all after this to get more info. So I guess the next question I have, a few people actually pre-submitted, I guess, like different versions of this. And as I'm sure that you probably know, because the study kind of went viral, but there was a 2015 study and the Boston Globe and other national media outlets amplified it about how the median net worth gap between white and Black families in Boston. So as I'm sure you probably know, white families had a median net worth of $250,000, but for Black families, it was just $8. And so different people that pre-submitted the question were wondering from your 3 perspective, if there were any ways or mechanisms to offset this enormous gap.
So there's this video that I would always show in a lot of the trainings I do around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was basically a track race, and they had a Black male, a Black female, and a white male, and a white female, and basically just the different obstacles that came upon their race. So with the Black male and female, they had, 400 years they couldn't start running. So that's 400 years of, because of slavery, that we wasn't able to start building that generational wealth. So how do you come back from a race that you're so far behind, right? And that's on different levels, whether you're Black, brown, Latino, like it's hard to then reach that pace that white people have been running all of their lives, right? Even if you don't come from money, you had the opportunity to make that. So the honest, real answer is reparations, is programs, is helping businesses, people get the tools that they need to kind of get a little bit ahead. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that don't have, you know, mom and dad to lend them $500,000 to get their business started, or even, you know, a couple thousand. So thinking about creative ways that we can help ourselves in community. I always tell people I was able to, you know, open up Emerald City by doing a GoFundMe campaign and just broadcasting it to my network. So things like that and programs like that will really kind of help bridge that gap. But it's, you know, when you're that far behind and trying to build wealth, there's only so much one person can do. On top of, you know, having crazy student debt, on top of living in one of the most expensive places in the country, there has to be some type of assistance.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Q said. I mean, something that still I feel some people don't understand, even though many of us have lived it, is that Boston is a very segregated town, like very, very segregated city. I think I read on a stat that out of the country's 51 greater metropolitan areas with like a large Black population, I believe Boston ranks 15. So like we're still a very segregated city. And for me, I know that some people think like, oh, well, redlining, this is a thing of the past. Like, we're still suffering the impact of that, the consequences of that. We're still seeing, you know, Black homes be appraised at less than their real value. And I'm talking about real estate because I really do believe that in terms of generational wealth and wealth building, real estate is a fantastic vehicle for this. In fact, at least in my personal research, when I have looked into, you know, families that fall into a certain median income and comparing that against Asian, Latino, and, you know, Black families and others, it is the inheritance of real estate. It is this inheritance of assets. And I think that it's important for us to understand this piece because although I do believe that, you know, reparations and other certain programs like are going to be helpful, I think it's important for us to understand the dire reality of where we are now and not wait, but to like really go forth and start. If you know something about real estate or commercial real estate or how you start educating people about this, because the reality is still that things are very segregated. And I think like at times, even thinking about my own upbringing and how my family was like, you know, you don't share about your problems, you don't air your dirty laundry. No. Go on LinkedIn, go to like whatever different associations, go to Eventbrite and meetups and get together with other people who are like-minded, who want to create a new business or entrepreneurs and learn from them. Share your, you know, share your concerns and your challenges, get that funding, learn how to do these things, because I feel that at times, because of the lack of knowledge, we're not able to start taking those risks that other people who not only have that generational wealth, but also have that generational knowledge about how to build wealth can take advantage of. I know that nowadays there are a lot of different programs that are offering, you know, to help people with low or, you know, no down payment ways of acquiring properties. I mean, there's FHA, there are VA loans, USDA loans, and I can talk about that, you know, at a separate time in terms of mortgages. But just to keep it short, I think it is very important to understand the reality that we live in. If you struggle trying to get your first job or get your first home or whatever the case may be, understand that many of us are struggling too. And even if you feel that you are not at your, you know, your what you call it, your mountain peak, that you are at your prime, I think it's very important for us to educate and not wait on certain programs or other things to come and rescue us. I really do believe that each one of us is each other's best resource. So that's why I always encourage people to share what you know. And like Sam was saying, really approach things communally. Because there is so, oh my God, our communities are so rich in knowledge and experience, and just coming from different backgrounds, different, you know, just languages, cultures. There's so much for us to get from that community. So we cannot sit back and wait. We need to be proactive.
Just quick, I'm really a big fan of universal basic income. I think that the data we've been collecting around it has been incredibly helpful, especially I looked to the Stockton, California study. Just giving people a few $100s a month they were able to like secure childcare. And because they had childcare, they could have better jobs, they could have more security in their home, whether it was renting or being able to save. So like that couple $100s really does have an impact. And I think that one of the ways that we continue to keep people in poverty and at that $8 weighed $8 of wealth in Black families is that we police how we give people money and what they do with that money. I think we need to just start giving out that money and be like, look, that's yours. You make your decision. We can provide different programming on like what you can possibly do with that money. But in the end, this is what you need to survive. And you should be able to have the freedom to decide what you do with that. And most people will make the choice to pay down bills or pay down debt. And we know that's what they did with the stimulus too, that they received recently, right? They were able to build some security into their future. So I think that putting those programs in and realizing that, we can't continue to dictate how people who are in poverty live their lives, whether it's like affordable housing or these first-time homeownership programs, right? We put so many hoops in front of people that they have to jump through before they can even get access to these things, that a lot of times people decide it's not worth it. And so it makes it difficult for folks to move forward. So I think we need to realize, people didn't get here by themselves. We put them here, we pressed them here, we got them here. So we need to stop putting up barriers to their success. And that means just giving them money. And it's not like we don't have the money to do that, right? We are a really wealthy country. So that's.
Yeah, based off of like one thing that I think that all three of you kind of touched on a little bit that really resonated with me was just kind of, I know like personally growing up, when talking about money or wealth or anything related to finances, my family was like, what's said in this house stays in this house, or there wasn't really like, I don't think I really had a safe space to ask those a lot of questions, and also was kind of intimidated in asking my friends for advice as well. And I guess from the three of you, maybe who have had like similar experiences related to conversations about money and generating wealth in your own families, I guess how did you overcome that, and what advice would you have for maybe people who are, I guess, in the same boat that are in the audience about like starting those conversations with their families? I don't know, like if Sam, if you would want to like start, since I know you've answered like for the last three times, but you don't have to if you don't want to. I just want to make sure that I'm like also calling you into the combo.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if I've had it with my whole family, but with my sister, definitely, and with my friends, I always ready to, they'll probably tell you that I embarrass them sometimes because I ask people how much they make. Or like I ask them like, hey, what did you negotiate, or what's your salary? And I feel very comfortable asking that question because the reality is we're here to make money, right? Like as much as I would like to work for an organization to drive the mission, the reality is I need to live and survive and pay my bills and pay my housing. So I think that, not talking about income, not talking about debt, wealth is just like a means by which to, keep people in these secret bubbles. And I'm not sure how I got there, actually. I probably just, continue. I think I was like reading and someone mentioned that like it's a form of oppression to not talk about wealth and money and income. And I decided that I would just ask people. And sometimes people tell me, most times people do tell me, sometimes people don't. But I think that just being able to like see someone ask that question too is important to making this progress and being able to have more open conversations around like the reality of what you're getting paid. Because a lot of times you may ask that and be like, whoa, I'm making $20,000 less than you and we're doing the same job. That's ridiculous. So that's a good step in my opinion, to start talking about it. And so if you want to ask me, feel free to ask me. Like if you run into me on the street, ask me.
Yeah, same. My family, I feel like it's a plague of Black and brown families, like keep your struggles to yourself. And that also is very isolating. So I was a part of a NECBAC, which is the New England, I think they changed their names, but it was basically a association of admissions counselors of color. And what we did every time we met, or I think it was once a year, we did a salary swap. So it was anonymous, so you can understand what you were making in relation to all the other colleges in your exact same position. So it gave you some knowledge to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what, the average stats are. And I think that's what initially kind of started my, my comfortability in asking about salary negotiations, money, and even like working in a college setting. I went to an engineering school and accrued a crazy amount of debt, and just being so silent about that. And then just opening up, and it's been helpful to other people. So it goes for wealth, it goes for salary, it goes for also debt too. Like, how do we talk about the financial burdens that we have? We need to start talking about them in order to like get out of them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that conversations need to happen. The hard conversations need to happen. And there are some things that, even as I've self-reflected and I've realized like, hey, a lot of our parents and grandparents, they have these, cultural norms because that's what they had to believe in order to survive. However, we must understand that like, these are certain things that maybe they applied in a different setting, but at this point in time, they're holding us back. And I think it is our role as, folks living and being able to navigate this generation, or sometimes like new spaces in college, and this knowledge, that I think it is our role to give back and educate them, right? On, hey, this is how you build wealth. This is how you balance your checkbook. This is the kind of credit cards that you want to go for. This is good debt. This is bad debt. I mean, I really do believe in, I love the principles of Kwanzaa, and two guiding principles for me have been, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, and then Ujamaa, where we're really thinking about cooperative economics. And for me, it goes back to my homelessness as well. Like, I remember I was very mad and confused as to like how someone could have graduated from a good college and be homeless, literally like the same day. I was like, this does not compute for me. And I think that's what forced me to really understand the reality of not having the right knowledge to navigate money systems, work life, how to understand how to set up a credit card, a bank, an account, any of these things. So I feel like I mean, it was a very personal experience, but I definitely took it like multiple levels of personal. And I was like, I don't ever want anyone else to experience this. And I felt like, in a way, disrespected by other people who knew of my background and never had these conversations with me, or even asked like, hey, what are your post-grad plans? Like, have you secured, X, Y, and Z? And I feel like these are, sometimes very sensitive conversations in our community, talking about work or talking about how you're balancing this and your mental health, talking about money. But I think it is important for us to break those generational curses in our families, and, just have the conversation. Because at the end of the day, the way that I think about it is like, hey, I rather have an awkward conversation with you around money, and this could potentially lead to you learning about something that you weren't previously privy to, or you making now a smarter investment decision, rather than be your friend for decades, or be a family member for decades and see you struggle with money, and see you like sacrificing your mental health, your physical health, seeing you in a really bad shape because you're not making good money decisions or good wealth building decisions that ultimately lead to your health. And so for me, it is a very personal thing. Like, I don't think that when I teach or whatever, I do it out of oh, I know everything. I am not, a real estate or cyber or any sort of expert, but I do believe that we need to teach and uplift and just share whatever little knowledge we have, because if we don't, in my opinion, the consequences are very dire. I mean, especially for our community.
Right. And the next question I have is also a pre-submitted question. So one person was wanting to know, it's kind of related to the twofold challenges that BIPOC communities face in Boston when trying to buy a home. And what they said is like the issue is that not only are the entry costs for buying a home high, but usually the value of homes and Black and Indigenous like POC communities are usually lower relative to the rest of Boston. And so with this double-edged sword, they wanted to ask from either three of you with varied perspectives about like what really can be done to address this, or how can marginalized groups trying to break into like buying homes or to the home buying market, address the, like those two challenges set against them.
Pamela, you've gone second. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So what I would say in terms of real estate, I'll talk about the real estate investing side. I do feel that the first and the most important investment would be in your knowledge, because I've realized that there are so many different ways of acquiring properties without money. And it's just about knowing the terms and different deals and who do you go to, and whether you're getting this from a church or someone or a distressed seller, whatever the case may be. So I think like the knowledge piece is very key. Something that I did as an example, because I also felt like, you know, remember this point, I'm like, I'm homeless. I'm just struggling to find like just a rent, any place to live really for me and my mom at the time. And what I started doing was saying, hey, I'm not going to try to get to like a perfect place or make money and in 20 years invest in a house. I want to be surrounded by people who own property right now and see like, how the heck do they do this? So I started going to different meetups and Eventbrites, like just to literally be in the room with other homeowners, with people who had seasonal rentals, with people that, you know, were landlords, with people that were investors, realtors, just the entire community. And I started like putting myself out there saying, hey, I'm interested in being an investor. I have no money. I have questionable skills. I have, you know, all of these other things that are not necessarily my bucket, but I do have time. I do have time and I'm eager to learn. And through that, I started finally connecting, because I won't lie, it was also really tough as a Black, you know, Latina, like to come into these spaces. I would tell you those meetings, I was the only person that looked like me in a lot of those meetings. And even though it was a bit slow moving at first, just from being in the area, I felt I was starting to learn different tips and tricks of the trade and starting to understand this is where I go. Eventually, I started just going on LinkedIn and finding like Black investors and literally just cold reaching out and being like, hi, I would love to have coffee and learn a little bit more about how you got to where you got to. And once again, happy to like volunteer my services. I just want to ride along and like understand, you know, your ecosystem. So those are like some of the things that I did just to like really invest in my knowledge after reading a lot of different books like Cash Flow Quadrant and Rich Dad Poor Dad. But like once I was able to grab, you know, really understand that piece and connect with a lot of other like investors of color, folks like Willie Mandrell is an example, who's a founder of Boston Wealth Builders, who I also found on LinkedIn, is that I started learning of different ways to acquire properties, as I mentioned, with little to no money down. So something that I would recommend for people who are looking to invest in their first property is, you know, there's a lot of different programs now, whether it's through NACA, which is a Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. I've had great experiences referring people over to NACA. I mean, they can help you buy homes with little to no money down, little to no closing costs, you know, below market interest rates, so a lot of different barriers there that they are helping to like level down. So NACA, or even like your city's first time home buyer programs. A lot of times, once you complete those programs, a lot of them are virtual now. You'd be eligible to take advantage of some even more cost reducing mortgages. So, I mean, those are just like two off the top of my head. But to be frank, I mean, if you're a veteran, there's the VA loans, which allows you to buy a home with 0% down. If you're looking to live in a rural area or even build in a rural area, now there's very generous USDA loans. So I would definitely say, you know, the first piece is invest in your knowledge and connect with other investors of color. And honestly, put yourself out there. It is super uncomfortable. You know, for me, at times I didn't even have the language. I didn't know what I was saying, but I would just be like, hey, I would like to learn more about this. I had to figure out what I had to offer, which at the time was just my time and hands-on keyboard, and be able to say, I want to learn, and go through it that way.
Just quickly, I think there's also an opportunity to think innovatively about how we acquire property, right? So I know a lot of white families in JP bought in JP years ago, and they bought together. So they got like 3 or 4 families together, and they bought a multifamily triple decker or something in Forest Hills, which is the area I live in. And I think that there's a lot of vacant parcels. I know that Councillor Campbell in District 4 has the vacant parcels initiative on Blue Hill Ave. Like, those are opportunities to pull your money together with other families and build generational wealth in that way. And, you don't always, like, I think that even Councillor Wu did that well. She bought a 2-family with another family and then bought them out over time. So I think that there's different ways to be innovative with how we acquire property and think like, yeah, maybe my credit score won't get me this, but me and some friends can get this. And then thinking like, how do we move this forward together? And that kind of goes back to the communal approach too, as well, because I don't think that costs of property, cost of land, cost of development are going to go down anytime soon. So it's like, how can we work together to build stability?
And one last thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Q.
I was just going to say, you guys, you all kind of spelled it out perfectly. So I don't have anything to add, really.
To Sam's point, I absolutely agree that there's different ways to think about this creatively. And that's another barrier that I've noticed, at least in my culture, which is like, okay, if I figure out this money thing, I'm gonna just do it by myself. Connect connect with other people, whether it's people from your different communities, your networks, your church, whatever the case may be. And that's why I am a big proponent of people just sharing out and speaking out like their goals, because I feel like when you're very bold and you stand true in what you're trying to achieve, things will align, right? Like, people will hear you and maybe they're not interested in investing, but they know a cousin, they have a sister, they have a friend of a friend of a cousin's friend who like would be interested, and they connect you that way. I remember before I had a penny to my name, I build out shirts. I created shirts that was just saying, hey, like, I'm interested, in buying your house. Which was really funny because my family would be like, girl, with what money? Like, you got no money. But I'm like, listen, though, like, I'm trying to get my name out there. So I would have my phone number. And that's how I started getting leads of people saying like, hey, I'm actually trying to sell my house. Are you a realtor? Are you this or whatever? And for the things that I could not do, I would pass them on to the people that I was meeting at these different meetups and building good relationships that way. Because now I'm giving them, clientele. But I was also able to start working with those people. And even though I may not have translated everything into a deal, I started getting my reps in with how do I position myself as an investor? Like, what is my, investment angle? And how do I want to potentially partner with these people to do a flip, to buy, many rental properties? Because to Sam's point, there's so many creative ways of acquiring properties. There's, seller financing. Also churches, there's a lot of organizations, structures, institutions in our neighborhoods that get homes donated to them and they do not want them. So there's also different ways of acquiring properties from these institutions and in a way relieving them from the burden of having to figure out, what to do with this piece of real estate that you do not want to manage and you're not built to manage.
And I do have something to add. And I will say, be okay with expanding your reach past the city limits of Boston. It's unfortunately, I have so many friends that are trying to buy in Boston right now, and they're getting outbid by tens of thousands of dollars in cash offers, right? And no amount of, pooling together can really alleviate that. So really just kind of broadening your view of like the greater Boston area. There are great places that have vacant storefronts, that have affordable homes. I kind of set my roots down in Norwood because it was close enough to the city, but quiet enough. But I found a great affordable condo thanks to a family member who's a realtor. So, just expand your view of things, just because as Boston is pricing itself up and pushing a lot of black and brown people out, there's still a lot of affordable areas, maybe not as close to Boston anymore, but that you can start building. And it's not, I was shocked at how many people of color and diverse Norwood is. Now that I have my shop, I'm really seeing everyone. So there's a lot of great communities even outside of Boston too.
The next question I had, it may be like kind of directed towards you, but I'm sure that like all 3 of you might have like other perspectives or an opinion. But I know like last year, especially after the murder of George Floyd and countless other like Black Americans, that initiatives like Buy Black or like supporting Black businesses really like shot off the ground. And from y'all's perspective, and maybe Q's perspective specifically, are like initiatives like Buy Black enough? And if not, like what other things can consumers do to, I guess, like generate funds or put funds into like Black business owners and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so in the spirit of wealth building, one thing will never be enough. The multiple streams of income, the multiple avenues, that's how you build wealth. And the 2020 protest, we have to remember, is like the second like really popular wave. I think it was back in 2014 when Black Lives Matter kind of officially founded. These are issues that have been plaguing the century since its founding, but kind of these two moments in time, a lot of initiatives around buying Black and supporting Black owned businesses. I did a pop-up in 2018 in the Seaport, and it's beautiful to watch Black owned Boss, who's run by my cousin Jada, kind of take over and expand that reach, and to see that happening all across the state. So not just in Boston, but all major cities. That is a huge factor, but it's not just about buying a body butter or a plant from someone who's Black. It's like putting them on to other resources and opportunities, right? So when I built Emerald City, I made it a point to bring along all of my creative friends that were in line with my vision to sell their wares here. So how do we start building more opportunities for Black and brown businesses to expand their reach, to make those sales, to make those accounts? So it is great to do, but your support has to go beyond just buying one thing or publicizing. Like, how do you connect those people in your networks to opportunities that are going to bring more money into their circles? So it's great. It's a great start, but thinking back to like the Black Square post, how do we go back to those companies, those individuals that claim to say that they're about supporting Black and brown businesses, but what does that actually look like in action items? It's been playing out beautifully in so many different situations that I'm aware of. Heather White of TrillFit really calling in a fitness company that posted a Black Square, but then released a whole summer fitness series that did not have any instructors of color in there, and having those dialogues. So how do we, again, call in people to really hold them accountable to saying, it's not just about buying something, it's not just about posting a Black Square. How do we implement these changes and have these conversations ongoing?
Yeah, to that point, I remember when everything happened, early 2020, and all of these different companies were, whether it was a black box or a statement. And, there are some things that reeked of just performative allyship. And I think something that I admire that a couple of people did was calling them out for like, what are you really going to do, right, about this beyond this period in time? And something that I began to do was telling folks like, hey, you're looking to donate to a cause. Think about what knowledge can you donate? Oh, you're a financial advisor? Listen, there are these mom and pop shops, or there are these other like struggling businesses in our community that are pillars of our community, and some that are just brand new that would honestly strongly benefit from having your pro bono, even if it's like just one workshop, but some advisory around what kind of loans should they look into in order to save their businesses, right? So also something that I did was starting to challenge different business owners, or just like people that had subject matter expertise around, don't just donate to a cause, but put your knowledge to work. Because there's so many amazing businesses that I saw really struggle and end up having to close shop simply because they did not understand the different, whether there was a business equity line of credit that they could have taken out, like there's a specific loan that they could have taken out, a grant, how to apply for grants, like, understanding like just different money that was just like available, right? And I had a really good friend from Northwestern Mutual who was like, that is so, wild that some people do not know how to fill out this particular application. I just started my consultancy last month and I already applied for it and got a grant of, a loan of $60,000 without a clear business plan. So I'm just like, that knowledge, you need to share it out instead of thinking of how do I just donate, make $500,000 donations. Like, share that knowledge, because I do believe in the power of partnerships and us being able to put, allies to work. So that's something at least that I've been encouraged by the different colleagues and different other folks that I admire in the community doing, and I have definitely taken to as well.
Great. So I'm gonna go ahead, sorry to cut off, or if anyone had anything else to say, just to get into some of the questions that audience members submitted while we were talking. One interesting one is that one person, Anne, said that student loans are not in and of themselves bad, and I couldn't have gotten through college without loans, but the problem is borrowing too much, borrowing in the private loan market and getting trapped going into college that's too expensive. So Anne was wondering, what could we possibly do to educate prospective students before they get into loan trouble?
So this is my life in higher ed, being in admissions, and also being drawn to that field because I was one of those students, right? I wasn't necessarily taking out money that I didn't need. I think that's also, there are those situations, but vastly students need that much. And the way that college is, tuition is now, highest one probably is around $80,000 a year. So there's just no way of really getting around loans. I think what we need to kind of educate people on now, especially as we're talking about Black and Brown communities specifically, is that what are the ways in which you can get the things that you're hoping to get out of your dream school? Maybe it's going to community college for the first 2 years and then finishing up somewhere else. When maybe it's, getting a job and working through college. The tough thing about college and getting an education right now is that the messaging hasn't changed when the economy has. So the same messaging that no one can take away your education, 100% true. Education is the key to success, still 100% true. But, that messaging, 20 years ago when college was maybe $15,000 a year versus $80,000, we have to start thinking about the system in which we're kind of pushing students into, college that aren't necessarily ready. I graduated with a civil engineering degree and environmental studies degree and hated it after my first year. And so encouraging and empowering students to take their time in understanding what they actually want to do, to give that kind of a contrast. I had a friend that was in community college. At the same time, I was wrapping up my 4-year degree, and he wound up, going on working at a company, and we connected maybe 5 years down the line. And I remember him saying the best thing I could have done for myself was not pursue the advanced degree right after I gotten my associates, because I was sitting there talking about my mortgage that I have to pay of student loans, while he was debt free, and still in the field, still working. So I think there's a lot more conversations that we have to talk to students about, versus whether or not you take out money to go to school or not. Is that the career that you want to stick to? And thinking creatively about how to navigate around those student loans, because unless you are making a lot of money, middle class, lower, college is really expensive and oftentimes not worth the payout when you're graduating, then making $50,000 a year. It's not adding up anymore. So we need to have a deeper conversation, I think, about schooling and the costs and loans, versus just telling students what not to spend money on versus what they should.
Can I say, I went to community college because my family was having trouble paying the mortgage. And so I stayed in LA and I worked full time, and I went to community college for 2 years. And, I got paid to go to community college. They gave me grants that I didn't need that much money for, to pay for my books and for my classes. And then I transferred to UCLA. Right. So, and I'm making $70,000 and I'm doing fine. And I well, not fine, I have lots of debt, but like that's not from college. That's from my other like things in life. But I think that as long as I think we focus a lot on like the elitism of going to like a name and a school, and those schools take advantage of you and saddle you with a ton of money, even though they have like billion-dollar endowments. So it's just like thinking it's not, you're going to get an education, and you're going to learn how to succeed in school, at a university, wherever you go. And as long as you take that love of knowledge and that love of like growing and changing with yourself, you'll be probably fine post college. Obviously that's not a catch-all, but like generally I don't think that there's a reason in the United States why a state school is not as good as like any other public, like private school.
Yeah, and I know that my comments will probably not be addressing the question directly, but I also wanted to just highlight the validity of having a career that doesn't involve college, that involves, a trade school, an alternative school, or whatever the case may be. I know folks who, got their certification to be a general contractor or a plumber and got their licenses and created their companies and are crushing it, right? And I think that at times, like in school, I know, like even for me, it was like college is the only method and to make money. It's the only way. And I think at the end of the day, what we gotta, at least for me, that I've been remembering, and I talk to my younger siblings about, is like, hey, knowledge is very powerful. Like knowledge is money, knowledge is key. Knowledge doesn't necessarily have to come from a 4-year institution. Like knowledge does not have to come from a Harvard, a Yale, or whatever the case may be. Like, when you really think about your passions, if it's gaming and video design, or, you like to do things with your hands, carpentry or whatever, there are amazing and very viable and very profitable career opportunities for people, in those spaces. So I think there also needs to be more, yes, financial literacy, but also career literacy, and visibility of the different ways that people can go down that entrepreneurial route, because sometimes people even see entrepreneurship of, oh, I have to, create the next Facebook, the next Twitter. And it's like, no, you could literally just, start doing your home designs or interior design and just learn how to create an LLC and, a business plan and whatever, and you can have your own business in that way too. So I think the voices of those people, and I know a lot of us probably know someone who has their own business, their own LLC, consulting, or whatever the case may be. I think those voices also need to be elevated, and really be highlighted in the classroom.
Another question that we have from Charlotte Simpson is, are any of you investing in the stock market? And if so, how did you get started? And if not through the stock market, how would you maybe accommodate a down payment for a house?
Does anyone wanna, I feel like I've been talking a lot. Does anyone want to go first?
I was just saying, I play around. I don't invest like privately, but I play around with my 403cb. And that's where I've been experimenting because it feels safer. But go ahead, family.
Yeah, I mean, I would, so a few things here. So the one quick thing that I'll mention is that if you work at a tech company or a company that's publicly traded, definitely take advantage of those, restricted stock units that they will give you. Sometimes they will offer free financial advisory. Take advantage of those. Those are the meetings that people typically are like, reject, go to those, learn. They will give you free stock investing advice there. But also, as far as learning, I mean, I did a lot of work listening to just different podcasts and going on YouTube. And once again, going to meetups and Eventbrites. Like nowadays, anyone can create an Eventbrite. So, it doesn't have to be, something that is, I would say, like, I have to go to a paid event. And I think that what I did when I would go to these events, because it's not that all of them were great, but I would network with people and ask them these questions, right? How exactly do you invest? Do you invest in, with contracts, individual companies, through mutual fund? Do you have, a self-directed IRA? And all of these questions. I think like the knowledge was really in you being, the richness was you in being able to connect with people and really understand that piece once again, get together in community with like-minded folks. who have like that shared interest. But as far as me with stock investing, I do invest in stocks, different ways, mutual funds, have the retirement. And then I also, use different platforms like Stash and Fidelity and E-Trade to go ahead and start doing research into different companies. And I go on Yahoo Financial and whatnot, read the newspaper just to see like the performance of certain companies. But I would say starting off with like some YouTube videos, like that doesn't hurt. I feel like nowadays we live, there's a lot of misinformation out there for sure, but we live in a time when there's a lot of really good information for free on different platforms. So that's definitely something that I would recommend. To quickly answer, I know I'm so long-winded, I'll do my best to be succinct. Your second question as to like, how do you save up for your first down payment? So something that I did was, because I bought my first property with no money of my own, is that I actually got an FHA loan, got approved, to buy a property that was around, let's say $400,000. And I was like, oof, okay, did the math to see how much money my down payment, my closing costs would be. And because I did it through an FHA loan, I would be able to get gifts from, family. So what I started doing was I started getting these micro loans from different family members. And I would tell them, and they were like $300, $500. Luckily, I'm the oldest of 12 and I have a really big Caribbean family. So I asked a lot of people. And I was able to get that money together, letting them know with these private, this is called a private lending agreement. Hey, if I'm able to pay you back in this time, let's say within 3 months, I'm going to be paying you with no interest. But if I pay you back between, let's say 3 and 12 months or whatever the case may be, I'm going to pay you back with 15% interest. So that was really enticing to people, because people looking at me like, yo, this is the first time you're buying a property. Like, I'm about to make a lot of money out of you because you're not going to be able to pay that back. So my strategy was, I'm going to use an FHA loan to buy a multifamily so that with the mortgage, it's basically getting paid by the rental income, right? So when I went ahead and I borrowed that money in order to give my down payment, I then purchased the property. I did a balance transfer so that I was able to pay everyone back within a week of me closing and at 0% interest. And then now I have a balance in my credit card, right? So what I did was I was able to rent out, I really hustled to rent out the units as soon as possible. And with the income from those rental properties, I was able to pay back the balance on that credit card in a year's time. So that is one strategy to be able to purchase a property with no money of your own. That said, that's only one example. There are ways for you to do it with hard money lenders and so on and so forth. But I just wanted to share that because, to Sam's point, there's so many creative ways of you being able to acquire properties, but it is going to take, some research and talking to people, really educating yourself and understanding what are the cards that you have in your hand, right? Like, what cards can you play? Because for some people, hey, it's been going through the church and talking to different tradespeople in their church and telling them, hey, if you're working at a house where the seller's in distress, let me know. And then I'm going to go ahead and communicate with that seller and see if I can purchase a property before they actually list it. And now it goes into these crazy bid wars. So everyone has different cards that they can play. So I think that self-assessment to understand, like, okay, well, what do I have? Is it good credit? Is it good connections? Is it a community? Is it a friend who's a carpenter and is in the trades? Like, and I can, weasel my way into this space. Like, but you really do need to understand what cards you have on your side.
Okay, so it is 101. So I want to thank the three of you so much for all of your expertise, your transparency and just the knowledge that you shared. Just as a 22-year-old, I learned a lot. And I think y'all probably saw this pre-submitted comment, but someone said quote, y'all are hella dope. And I think that just pretty much encapsulated all of the energy. And I'm sure that other people felt the same way. And I can't thank the audience enough for tuning in during the Zoom period to also listen. And Mary Campbell from the Globe wouldn't none of this would have come together without her hard work. So thanks to her as well. I hope that all of y'all have a great day, and I hope that y'all can come to another Globe event because I had a lot of fun. Thank you again.